Hey Joe fans, JoeFan82 here, and I have some comic book news today. This actually came out last week, and let me give you some context before I get to the news. IDW Publishing was releasing two G.I. Joe comic books concurrently. The first was Real American Hero, G.I. Joe, A Real American Hero, written by Larry Hama, who is continuing the Marvel run that he did from 82 through 94. And the second was considered the IDW continuity, and that was a part of the new Hasbro shared comic book universe, along with Transformers, Mask, ROM, etc. And the writer for that was Aubrey Sitterson, and he was doing it for about 9 or 10 months, and from what I understand, sales were not great, and his social media presence was not met with a lot of praise from fans. He seemed to be very combative. He said a lot of negative things. I could do a whole nother video on that alone. Anyway, he did an interview last week with bleedingcool.com, which covers comic books. And so they did the whole interview, and at the very end, they asked him, as you enter your second year writing IDW's G.I. Joe ongoing, what are you thinking about in terms of long-term plans? I'm going to put a link for this in the description so you can read the whole thing if you want. So they ask him, what are his long-term plans for G.I. Joe? And then he says, and I quote, "Unfortunately, IDW told me early this month that Scarlett's strike force was being canceled after issue number 3. Okay, so G.I. Joe was ending, I believe at issue 9 or something, a month or two ago. And then it was picking up again under a new name, Scarlet Strike Force, at the end of December, as a completely new comic going forward, dropping the G.I. Joe name for some reason, and it was only going to be called Scarlet's Strike Force. So it was a team led by Scarlett. So they told me early this month that Scarlet Strike Force was being canceled after issue number 3, and with up through issue number 4 already written, that means ending on a pretty outrageous cliffhanger. It's really disappointing, not only because fans won't get to see the conclusion of the story and all the payoffs we've been building to, including Grand Slams, but because of all the gorgeous work from Nelson, Elias, Ryan, Taylor that we've all been robbed of." And Bleeding Cool asked, is this a result of the controversy back in September, which is all of his social media stuff, is specifically a comment he made about 9/11. And Aubrey says, not from what I understand. IDW told me they made the decision due to low sales. So since that came out, certain websites have come out and said, how can this be due to low sales? The book isn't even out yet. It's because it's a woman-driven comic. Scarlett's in charge, so that's why it's got canceled. So the reason behind it, according to IDW, is low sales. So Aubrey seems to, according to this, he seems to agree with that. I tend to think the same thing. I think the sales for G.I. Joe dropped so low after that whole controversy that they realized that Scarlet Strike Force wasn't going to sell and they were going to be losing money, so they decided I guess issues 1 through 3 were far enough along that they just decided to go ahead and publish those, but then cancel it after number 3. So this raises several questions. Number 1, what happens next? So that means so issue 3 will come out, I guess, February, March, somewhere in there. So after that, there's only going to be one G.I. Joe title being published, and that's the Real American Hero by Larry Hama, which means there's no G.I. Joe title associated with the Hasbro shared universe that IDW has been publishing. So what do they do from here? Do they hire a new writer, have a new book that continues G.I. Joe? And if they do, does that continue the same continuity that was established before? Do they continue with the threads left by Aubrey Sitterson? Or do they abandon everything that he did and try to retcon that out somehow? My personal preference would be for Larry Hama's A Real American Hero book to be enveloped or be absorbed into the Hasbro shared universe. But I don't think that's going to happen for two reasons. Number one, I don't think Larry Hama is interested in the shared universe at all. I think he just wants to do G.I. Joe, do his own thing, and not be tied to any other properties. The second reason is that I think it would be very difficult to explain how this other continuity gets into everything else, because it's not the same as the IDW continuity at all. So I think that would just be too difficult. I don't think it's going to happen. So what I want to know from you guys is, what are your thoughts on this? Do you agree with Aubrey? Well, he wasn't fired. The series was canceled. So if there's no book to write, he doesn't have a job. Do you agree with the series being canceled? Were you happy at all with Aubrey Sitterson's run? Going forward, do you think there should be a new G.I. Joe book? And if so, should it continue with the same elements and continuity that Aubrey had laid out? Or should they try to do something completely different? And have you been reading Larry Hama's book, A Real American Hero? I've been trying to jump on board. I missed pretty much everything, so I'm trying to catch up. But I'm fully on board with that book now. So let me know in the comments what you think about all this. That's going to do it for this video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.